Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of So Chatty with Walter and, of course, me. And this is episode 140, and it's May the 3rd, 2024, and it's all about Accuquilt, part 1. This was a topic that one of our subscribers wanted us to go into more depth about. Most people know, if you're a regular here, that we own an Accuquilt system and quite a few pieces to it, and it is a pricey investment. So we're going to talk about that over the next few weeks about, getting the most out of your investment, the do's and don'ts of Accuquilt cutting, and different things like that that we have learned in our experience with it. And how long have we had an Accuquilt now? A couple of years?
Yeah.
I guess. When I say we, I'm just being polite. It's mine. But Walter bought a lot of my dies for me, so whatever. And he has used it.
Mm-hmm.
But he's going to play devil's advocate a little bit
I've used
today.
it, but I haven't used it a lot.
Yeah, so he's going to play, pardon the expression, dumb blonde person. As points come up, he's going to ask me questions about it or whatever. So, but before we get into, excuse me, I'm still getting over COVID. Before we jump right into today's topic, let's take a look at some other things before I die that we've been working on. And when I say we, I mean me. So, first of all, I finished the Pride Flag quilt. Here it is. I'm very happy with the way it turned out. It's not a complicated pattern. It's all made up of half square triangles. The tricky part is getting all of your half square triangles in the right position, because you see that V, especially when it comes down, Walter's studying it now carefully. He's looking for one that's turned the wrong way. There isn't. I've already caught that. Anyways, in the quilting on it, which you can't really see in this picture, I think I can blow it up a little bit. It'll probably go a bit grainy though. There you can see. It's a ribbon and heart pattern that I found. And love is love. So that's what I used in the background of this. So as I said, I think it turned out pretty nice. It isn't huge. It's more or less, it's more of a wall hanging than a quilt in terms of its size. So yeah, I think it's too big to hang on my door, my front door of my house during Pride Month. I don't know, I'll have to check and see about that. And I'll have to use magnets in that case, because I don't want to mark up the new doors with anything. Okay, so we've been working on that.
I think it's too wide for the door.
What, you think it's too wide for the door? It probably is. Well, whatever. So I did what I said I wasn't going to do. I made a rope bowl. Okay, one of the most tedious things I've ever made in my life, and I thought a jelly roll rug was tedious, because I made one of those once. You made one of those too once, didn't you? Yeah,
it's pretty boring.
It's pretty boring, pretty tedious. This is right up there. I mean, okay, let's be real about this, shall we? People are all a-gaga right now about making these rope bowls. Well, guess what? For the time and the effort it takes for you to do this, you can go to the dollar store and for $4 buy something very similar. Now, people are talking about making these as gifts for other people. Oh, nothing says I like you a lot by giving me a stupid rope bowl. Like, really, I'm sorry. I know
I wouldn't be too thrilled about getting a rope bowl.
I mean, there's lots of people out there that think these are the cutest things since sliced bread and kittens. But really, I can think of better use of my time. Now, the controversy here is, can you embroider on the bottom of the bowl? Well, yes, you can. We've been saying don't do it. And I still stick by that. I tried it on this. You don't see the inside of this because it didn't work. I did what the instructions said. I mean, first of all, you got to basically stick it down to your stabilizer. And they're using water-soluble stabilizer. So they're using like a spray, basting spray or spray glue. You stick it down to that. And I started off with it. Now, you got to be careful with the design that you pick, because you don't want something that is too dense, like a lot of satin stitches and stuff like that, because they tell you in the videos that I watched that that could give you grief. They suggest these ones that look more like sketches. There's less thread in them. Okay. So I did it. I put it down and it started to work out okay. It was working fine. I didn't have to worry about the height of my foot being not enough. Although I was using 7 and 32nd size rope. Um, and they talk about you using anywhere from that to a 1/4 inch. I think 1/4 inch would be really pushing it. So sorry about my voice. It figures. I haven't been too bad all day today. I do this and now it get worse. Um, and what happened was after it had done a couple of minutes of stitching, it's popped it out of the hoop. Um, I think that was because I used a spray glue. And when I say spray glue, I used a basting spray, a spray basting spray. And I think it was gumming up the needle, and the needle was catching as it went down. It was just enough. It popped it from the hoop. So I stopped. I wasn't going any further with that. It isn't worth the effort, in my
Yeah,
opinion.
I think you can buy a stabilizer that is actually sticky on one
Yeah,
side.
you can. You
Yeah.
can. Which might work better. But the point is this. Why? Why? They are not that unique. They're not particularly attractive. I don't care how much embroidery you do on it. If you're trying it out to learn a new technique, and basically that's why I did it. Because, we said that it wasn't worth the effort, the whole bit, but I thought, well, eat my words. Let's give it a go and see. No, I don't eat my words. I do not think it's worth the time or the effort in this for something like this. Now, people are going to say, well, yeah, but you can do some unique things, like you can make them different sizes. Yes, you can. I may have got a little carried away with the size of the one I made. Yeah, but I had all that rope. So what the heck? Others think, well, you can decorate it and do things. You can use variegated threads. I've seen that done. It does add an interesting effect. I just used a plain white thread for this. Attach things to it and whatnot. Makes a unique gift. Hmm. Well, if anybody ever decides they want to give me a rope bowl, don't waste your time. I don't want it. Sorry, I know you're going to think that's horrible. But what do you think?
Well, I don't think, I'm not sure if I care for them or not. I don't know. To me, I don't know. Maybe if you made one special or something that looks special, but I don't know.
I've seen hundreds of pictures of these stupid rope bowls online, and I can't tell you there's any that I think are that special with it. In fact, most of them all look about the same. And the other thing is, there is some expense involved in making one of these because that rope, I got 100 yards. I think it was 100 yards, or was it 100 feet? Might have been 100 feet on Amazon for $12 Canadian. Okay, and I used almost all of the rope for this size. So right there off the bat, it's going to cost you like $10 anyways to make. And as I said, you can go to a dollar store or you can go to Walmart and you can find something like this in various sizes for, next to nothing. Now, I suppose some people are going to say, yes, but you handmade it. Mm,
You didn't make the rope.
I didn't make the rope. I just stitched the damn thing together and watched my eyes bug out of my head as I went around and around and around. So I don't know. There's lots of people out there that think this is wonderful. Now, I thought, well, maybe I can do something with my 3D printer. So I made an insert for it. Here's what my thoughts were. First of all, I made the insert too tall. Okay, so that was a mistake. The other thing I was thinking of, okay, flower pot. So if with the insert inside and below a little smaller so you don't see it over top of the edge of the rope, yeah, it's waterproof then. And as a flower pot is concerned or goes, it probably would make a nice, cute flower pot. I even thought of I could do some freestanding lace embroidered flowers or something like that, and glue gun them or fabric glue them to, the edges or around the perimeter of the bowl, and that would make it a little bit more special. But here again is where I'm saying, is it worth the effort for that? I don't know. But if you're somebody who thinks, oh, this is so neat, I love it, I'm making them for all my friends, I'm giving everybody a rope bowl at Christmas.
Maybe they're making little doilies
Yeah.
or coasters or something.
Yeah, okay. You can make placemats, which is just big circle. Okay.
Hmm.
And you could probably embroider on the placemat if you get it to stay down and not pop out of your hoop. And that might be interesting if you like round placemats. You can make coasters with it. And there's different ways you can colorize your rope as well. So, yeah, that might be okay. But, I think after you've made one, you're going to look and go, oh, I was thinking of making 10 more of these. Maybe I'll rethink that. So, whatever.
We can make coasters and then embroider idiot in the middle of them, and you got idiot coasters.
Idiot coasters. Yeah. Walter's so funny. Isn't it funny? It is so funny. Anyways, I tried it. I stand by what we have said about embroidering on them. So, yeah, there you go. Do with that information what you will. Okay, so what little projects is Walter working on? He had great ambition this week. What were you going to do?
Well, no, I washed out that fabric from Philippa, and then I was gonna cut out the shirt pattern for Saturday, which I haven't done yet.
Oh,
So
yeah, well, yeah. So that's been a productive week for you. Yep.
yeah, well, I'm not a big avid sewer like you are.
I have to admit, though, I have not been in the best of sewing moods in the last 2 weeks. This
I've been
COVID
mucking
thing.
around with my car earlier this week and stuff too.
Yeah, well, whatever. Mucking around with your car. Well, that's all fixed now.
Yeah, it's all
So
fixed
that
now.
all works. So that's good.
And I got my snow tires off,
Yeah.
so
Okay. So there you go. He was productive in a very superficial way. Okay. So announcements. Sewing with Stephanie and Steven. Wednesdays, 9 a.m. Start time. Come when you want to, leave when you want to. Runs until about 4 o'clock in the afternoon, Eastern time. Everybody knows the drill. Links in the show notes. Let's talk about the big event coming up tonight.
well, we were going to talk about that embroidering on the snow
Oh, okay.
rope bowl because we said I did find something online that said about how to embroider on
Okay,
a
well,
rope
let's
bowl.
talk about that. We'll hold off on the announcements for a second.
Yeah,
I forgot.
and that they said in this section, it was on OESD, I believe, and it said to use 50 weight Orfil thread for the embroidery, which I found is a little strange for using it on embroidery. I don't know if they were getting a specific type of effect because Orfil is not um, shiny like most embroidery threads. Maybe they were trying to make it look more like
But I don't think
the
they meant for the embroidery part.
yeah, no, they said
What
for
was way in the
the
embroidery?
top thread, yeah.
Oh, okay.
The bottom thread was just it said just to use pre-wound bobbin or something like that. But they said to use that as a top thread because the example they showed on if you look it up, they're showing a gold colored Orfel thread and the pattern is gold
Oh,
on
okay.
it, right? So I don't know why they were suggesting that. It didn't really explain why they were suggesting the using Orfel. Um, the other thing was they were discussing what kind of foot to use, and I think there's a forum, a 550 Genome 550E Facebook forum that was discussing changing the foot on their machine to like a foot with a spring on it, right? And on the OESD thing, they were talking about changing your foot to an open toe foot, right? And that's where this discussion on the 550E was happening on Facebook. The problem is the 550E only has a couple of different feet that you can use: the standard foot and a couching foot, right? There is no other foot you can use. But possibly if you were using like a multi-purpose embroidery machine that also doubles as a sewing machine, you could change your foot on that,
Yeah.
right? Now I don't know what the purpose is of changing this foot. to a different foot, because on the 550E, which specifically we talk about on our embroidery series, is basically our embroidery series is about using the 550E for everything, not a general embroidery machine type of thing. So everything we talk about on our channel is based on the 550E.
Yeah. And there is no such thing as a general embroidery machine. They are all dedicated to a brand.
Yeah, they're all
And their
dedicated.
feet are dedicated to that brand. Bernina has theirs,
Yeah.
Janome has theirs, Husqvarna has theirs, all those ones like that. So there's a lot of misinformation going around out there. Take it with a grain of salt. If you, first of all, if you're daring and you want to try these things and you're not worried about wrecking your machine, go for it. If don't take what anybody says as gospel, and a lot of them leave information out as to what machine they're using.
Mm-hmm.
So one size does not fit all. And we've already talked about all that kind of stuff as well. So I guess it's buyer beware,
Mm-hmm.
or, you take your chances. If it's, I don't feel something like making a rope bowl, embroidering on a rope bowl is worth the chance of throwing the timing out on your machine or worse.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think it's worth it. Like I said, if you want a rope bowl that bad, go to Walmart, go to a dollar store, whatever, and buy yourself one.
Yeah, like with any machine that you're using, be cautious about what you're doing on that machine, that you could actually wreck something
Yeah.
on the machine.
And you know what we're going to get? We're going to get a couple of people who are going to come and go, I make these all the time. I don't have a problem with them. Well, bully for you. Glad it's working out for you. But you don't need to tell us that because you're not proving anything, okay, to us. I hate those kind of comments. All right? We're telling you what we know from our experience. You do you, okay?
If you want to give it a try, go ahead,
Go
give it a
for it.
try.
Go for it.
But we're not recommending
We're
you
not
do.
recommending it. Okay? So, but up to you. Up to you. You're your own boss, okay? Okay. So, this weekend is the Idiot Quilter Retreat. I think I have 4 spots left now, but it's pretty much closed. I've had a few people drop out from that. That's why there's 4 spots available for one reason or another. And thank you to those people who were responsible and accountable and who wrote to me and said, so sorry, I can't go now because of, things happen. And that's great. Thank you for letting me know with it. That's very much appreciated. I sent out on Wednesday, I sent out a big email that has everything, the agenda for the day. It has the links for tonight's icebreaker cocktail party and for the retreat tomorrow as well. There's Zoom links, okay? So you will not find those links on any of my videos, okay? They are in that email. If you did not get that email, check your spam to make sure that my email is not blocked to you and everything. If you did not get that, please send me an email and I will send it to you. I will not be able to help you first thing tomorrow morning with this. I will be busy getting people in. I have to do attendance, sort of a thing. So I won't be able to spend the time to help you out with your problems. So check as soon as you see this. If you're not sure whether you got the email or not, check, look in spam, make sure I'm not blocked. Send me an email. I will send it to you. Okay? Also, in that email, you will find an attachment, and the attachment is for my second pattern that I just finished writing a few weeks ago. It is now yours, free. For those of you that aren't registered for the retreat, next week I will make a link available to my Google Drive so that you can get your own copy of it as well. Now, I had some problems on Wednesday sending out the email, and thanks to the ladies who are regulars on Sewing with Stephanie and Steven, they're the ones that told me they didn't get the email because I wouldn't have known. And that would have been disaster. I spent most of the day rebuilding my mailing list and everything, trying to figure out what was wrong. I was in chat mode with my internet provider and everything, trying to figure out why my emails weren't going back. Finally figured out something. I had put a link to the Google Drive to download the pattern I just mentioned. And for some reason, my internet provider saw that link as malicious and it blocked the emails from going out. Once I removed that link, they went out fine. Now, some of you may have got the email multiple times over because I was testing the system. Sorry about that. But I'd rather inundate you with a bunch of emails to make sure you got it than not get it at all. So yeah, that's why now that pattern is an attachment to your to the message. Okay. There's also some helpful links on how to use, if you're relatively new to Zoom, how to use Zoom with whatever device you're going to be hooking up with, whether you're hooking up with your computer or with an iPad or with a tablet or with an Android phone or whatever. Um, there will be a minimal amount of help technically during the retreat because there's only me and Walter eventually will be there. So, test your equipment to make sure it's all working for you the way it should be. Also, I had this question come up. Do I have to be on camera? Yes, that's the answer. Yes, you do have to be on camera. What I mean is your camera needs to be hooked up and we need to be able to see you. Why? Security. To make sure that we don't have somebody on there that shouldn't be on there. Now, there shouldn't be any possibility of that because I have a waiting room on Zoom and I'll be letting you in one at a time. So, and I'm verifying your identity next to my registration list. But you never know. And
Yeah, not only that, it's basically a retreat just like you would if you had an in-person retreat, and so seeing your face is part of that.
yeah, in fact, it unnerves people sometimes when some people come on and they don't have their camera turned on. Now, I know there could be technical difficulties with this for some people. So we'll deal with that if that happens, but with you. But if you're just not turning it on because you're naked, put on clothes. Because your hair isn't perfect that day, God only knows. Mine's not either because I haven't had a haircut in 5 weeks. Um, we're not there to judge you on that kind of stuff. We're not there to judge you on anything. There's no judgment here. It's a safe zone, okay? But just keep that in mind, all right? Now, there will be some tips that will happen when you first go on. There'll be a screen up in your left-hand corner of your computer monitor will be what I call announcements. And it's a slide, sort of a continuously running slideshow that talks about the agenda, keeps you informed about what's coming up next. And there'll be some in the very beginning of it, while I leave that up for the first hour or so. There will be some tips and tricks about how to make your experience that day technologically pleasant with it. Like one of the main things is when you're not talking, put your microphone on mute. Okay, so you might want to check out how you do that. It's not hard, but look into that if you're not familiar with that. Why do we want your microphone on mute? Because there's 94 of you. And if your machine is close to your microphone system, and depending on your settings on your microphone system, we might only hear your machine in the background. One, that sound is annoying. And two, the other problem with that is there's something called speaker mode that people like to use sometimes when they're on Zoom, which means that when someone's speaking, their picture comes up, bang, fills up your screen. That's that person. If your machine is running and the microphones pick it up, that's what will be in the, oops, yeah, that will be what will everybody's going to see and focus on. The other thing too is if you've got other people in your household that day, like your husband, your grandchildren, whatever, son, daughter, someone popping in, you should make sure that they're aware of the fact that you are online that day. Because if you have a conversation with them, or even if your phone rings and you answer it, guess who's going to be the center of attention? And 93 other people are going to be listening to every word that is said. So if your husband wants to talk about the fact he doesn't have any clean undies and he wants to know what you did with them all, or if someone's calling you on the phone and has decided to tell you all about their latest vacation or cruise that they just got back from, we're going to hear all of that. Or if your boyfriend or girlfriend calls, you might want to keep that secret. So it's a good habit, and we'll go over this again, to put your microphone on mute until you wish to speak. And then you can turn it back on. Okay? Um, don't make me mute you, because I have the power. I can with that. And to be honest, I don't want to be rude. But if somebody's carrying on a conversation in the background while somebody else is trying to tell us something, or a presenter is presenting, I will mute you. Okay? So don't get offended by that if I mute you, because you may forget to mute. That happens. That happens. It's very easy to forget to mute. So just keep that in mind. Anyways, that stuff's all in the email that you should have already received. And as I said, we'll go over it very briefly when we do the official welcome tomorrow. Now tonight, Friday, this is May the 3rd, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, Walter and I will be hosting an icebreaker cocktail party, a virtual one. The Zoom link is in that email as well. Join us if you wish, just to socialize for a couple of hours with other people that are going to be at the retreat. The idea of this is you don't know everybody, right? And some people, this is their first virtual retreat, so they might be a little nervous about it. It's just to help you get over being nervous, that you'll see that everybody's very friendly, very supportive, nothing to worry about at all. So if you want to bring something along besides something to eat and drink, if you so desire, and you want to show us something, feel free to bring that tonight, and there will be an opportunity for you to show us something very briefly as well. Okay, so it's going to be a good day. Hopefully, all of the technology works out okay, because when you most put your most faith into technology, it can let you down. And so we'll go from there. We have prizes tomorrow, lots of fun, and the presenters are going to be great. You saw the agenda, you know who they are. They're people you've already know before, and I have watched their presentations already because their presentations are pre-recorded, but they will be here live as well to answer any of your questions after the presentation is over as well. So yeah, it'll be good for that. Okay, I think that's all I need to tell you right now about tomorrow. Just another advance notice. Next Wednesday night at 7 p.m., we have another edition of the Social Review. That's Stephanie of Stephanie Stitches, Shannon of Slay Arts, Russ of Quilt Meets World, and Walter and I as well. And this month's topic is about items that we can't live without, and items that were a complete waste of money that we bought in terms of sewing and quilting. So I'm sure there'll be some controversial things in there too. One man's tools, another man's piece of garbage. So that's what's coming up on Wednesday, May the 8th, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. You'll find a link for that in the show notes below. Plus, you will also, it's already up in the live section of my channel, of the Idiot Quilter. You know how you get the advance warning about that. That's already there. So all you need to do is that evening, click on it, and you're in. Okay. Anything else that we should be talking about? No? Okay, good. All right. Let's get into today's topic. And today's topic is an overview of what the Accuquilt system is all about. I'm sure many of you have heard about the Accuquilt. It's very, very popular. It's also very, very expensive. So it's one of those things where, yeah, it would be nice to have, but can you afford it, or do you want to spend that kind of money on it? So those are all things we're going to talk about, not just today, but in the coming weeks, because this is going to be another series. So to start off, let's talk about what is an Accuquilt system. What's an Accuquilt system, Walter?
I don't know.
You don't know. You've used it. Well, actually, a lot of people don't know what it is. It is a die cutting system for cutting fabric. Now, some terminology here. What are dies? Dies are basically, how would you describe them? Forms?
Yeah, they're
Shapes, yeah.
shapes, and they shapes are made into sort of what a blade, right?
Yeah, into a blade.
Right. So like consider like if you want to buy if you want a square shape, you basically it basically is a platform that has a square knife in it
Yeah,
that will cut that shape out.
and it works under pressure.
Right.
We'll talk more about that in a minute. But essentially, what it is for cutting your fabric. Dies, you can buy these for people who are paper crafters. I've
Like
had
if you can
several.
think of it as a cookie cutter,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
If you make cookies and you want to make heart shaped cookies, right? You have a heart shaped cookie cutter. This is basically what it is. It's like a cookie cutter, but it's made to cut fabric,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Now, there's die cutting machines on the market, and there have been for years, that cut paper into different shapes. All kinds of different ones. I've owned probably about four different ones in my life as well. Well, this is basically the same concept, except it's made to exclusively cut fabric. So they come in different types, different sizes. The major manufacturer of this kind of system here in North America is called Accuquilt. They were a company, I think, that were owned by a bigger company called Sizzix. Sizzix has been around for a long, long time, and they were chiefly famous for as a cutting system for paper products into
Yeah.
shapes and things like that. I'm
So instead of it like being an actual cookie cutter where you
Yeah,
hold it and you cut it, they've set it up in such a way so that it's safer for you to
yeah,
cut fabric in a way, and it's in a different format.
yeah. But we're going to talk a little bit more about how that works. But just in general, this is what you need to know what Accuquilt is. Accuquilt is the brand name. What it does is cut fabric faster and more accurate than having to do it with rulers and a rotary cutter. Okay, and there are some advantages to that, and there are some disadvantages, and we're going to be talking about that too as time goes on. But right now, what I want to show you is what I own. I got into Accuquilt in a big way, but then when don't I? So I have spent a lot of money on Accuquilt, and I'm just going to plug in that video that I made earlier today just to show you overall what I have and what we're talking about. So that I'm going to put in here right now. For the next few weeks on So Chatty, we're going to be talking about the Accuquilt die cutting system, which I absolutely love. But it is an expensive investment, and well, there's a lot of things you do need to know before you decide to invest the kind of money that you will invest in this. So first of all, I have two machines. This is my first machine. This is the Go Big. It is an electric machine, and it is great. This is especially good for anybody that has trouble with their hands or their wrists, if you have arthritis, that kind of thing. However, it is pricey. So if you want, there's other models that like the Go. This one is a manual machine. You can see it's got a crank right here. And it works just as well as the electric machine, but of course you have to crank it yourself. Now you're going to wonder, why do I have two machines? I had some problems with the electric machine. Those problems have now been resolved. And but in the meantime, I didn't know how long I would be down without my machine, and I do use it quite a bit. So I bought this as a backup machine. Yeah, I know, overkill. Now, it's not just the basic machine you need to invest in, but you need to invest in dies. And there are a lot of dies. And if you can see here on my shelves, and we'll be talking in other parts of this series about storage methods and about all these different, what they call cubes, because they come in various sizes, and trying to figure out which cube you need can be somewhat tricky, although not really. You also need to have plastic, I don't know what you call these, a pallet. They are part of the cutting system, which we'll come to and explain as well. So the dies themselves come in various sizes. You can see that's a really big die, and not all Accuquilt machines can handle dies of this size. The Go Big can. But for example, this one, it cannot handle that big a die. Now, there are lots of other dies you can have, and I'm just moving around here in my sewing room. Storage is a bit of a trick, but I will talk about some tips and tricks on how to do that. But you can see here, here's are my longer strip dies, and I have more there, and then some of my other dies. Now, I have dies I've never even taken out of the package yet. Yeah, I'm a little bit of a fanatic. What I've just shown you now here, between all of this equipment that's here, this represents probably $5,000 or $6,000 by the time you're done. Yeah, I told you, this is an expensive investment. But we're going to talk about all of that in today's series and in the series that come in the weeks to follow. Okay, so now you've seen what my system is, or systems, and everything like that.
So on your video, I haven't seen your video. Do you also show? You show the electric cutter?
And
do you also show the manual cutter?
Yes, I do. And so that I have the second from the top machine, which is called the Accuquilt Go, and that's the electric one. There's a machine above that that's called the Studio. The Studio will take, it's more industrial. If you were having to cut the same shapes hundreds of times, like maybe in a quilt store where you're making up applique kits or something like that, that might be the machine you would want. But for the average consumer, the Accuquilt Go Electric is the top of the line. But the other one that I showed in the video with the crank, that one is a little smaller machine, so not all the dies fit in that. And it's manual.
Yeah,
And
so you wouldn't need electricity.
You won't need electricity for it, which makes that particular one a little bit more portable if you want it to. You saw how I laid it out, and it folds up. If you want to take it to a retreat, it would be a little bit easier than having to lug the electric one, because that's a heavy machine, a little bit more awkward for transportation purposes and things like that. And you need an outlet, right, for it. But anyways, let's talk about how an Accuquilt, the principle behind an Accuquilt, how it works. And I did have a diagram. And let me just find my diagram here of this. Okay, just a sec. Okay, I found my diagram. Now, this isn't exactly what a die for an Accuquilt machine looks like. It's the same principle. In the one that I found this diagram for, it's for something for making those boxes that you see up in the top left-hand corner. But if you look at the what looks like a wooden rectangle, a wooden platform, those little gray lines that are there, those are actually embedded steel blades. Now in this one, this is an industrial type of die. It doesn't show any of the foam around it, so you could drag your hand across that and cut yourself very badly because they're very, very sharp. The Accuquilt dies, let me grab a die so I can see what I'm... So here's an actual Accuquilt die. This one does, I think they usually label them on the side. This is a half square triangle, 4 inches finished. Okay, so you see there's foam. This is foam all the way on the outside and on the inside. And they make it in 2 different colors so you can see more clearly the shape. They didn't always used to do that. They used to be all one color of foam, and it was very difficult to see what shape was going to be cut out. So this gray part is the part that's going to be cut out. And there's a blade all the way around the edges of this and up this diagonal line in there. And if I push my finger on it, I can feel the blade. I don't recommend dragging your finger on it. This is the protection. That one that I'm showing you in this diagram, excuse me, does not have the foam around it. Okay, because it's industrial. So this makes it a little safer for handling, because I can pick this up like this and not have to worry about cutting my fingers. That one that you're seeing in the diagram, it could cut you. Excuse me. Starting the coughing again. So what basically happens is, let me go back to here, is this lays like this on the bed of the machine. You put your fabric over top of this. You put a plastic pallet on top of that. Gives it pressure. And then it goes through the machine. And the machine has rollers. And the rollers put pressure on this. And that pressure pushes the die up and the fabric down so that it cuts. It's through that pressure.
So that backing plate also is the part where you're pressing against it, so that it'll cut right through, right?
Yeah, you can't use this without the plastic pallet that goes on top of it, because they have designed the machine in such a way that this would just slide through. It wouldn't do any cutting. It wouldn't put any pressure. With that plastic plate that's on the top of it, that makes it fit in there more snugly. That gives the pressure. If you didn't have that plastic plate, and if it did go up in that, these blades would chop into the roller. The rollers are made out of kind of a semi-hard rubber surface. So you do not use one of these without the plastic plate. And the plastic plates you buy separately, or in some cases, depending if you've bought it as a kit, it'll come with the plastic cutting mat. Now, if you are, yes, a good term for it. I was calling it a pallet, but cutting mat's really what it is. Now, if you're familiar with die cutting paper systems, like the Big Shot, those kind of ones, they have the same kind of system. So you know that over time, the plastic plates will wear out, but they're very inexpensive. And they'll last a long, long time. Okay, before it gets to the point where there's so many grooves cut in them that, they're not doing a good job of cutting anymore. So you don't have to worry about that. They're very inexpensive to buy those. So that's essentially how an Accuquilt works. It's just a system of pressure, pushing fabric onto cutting blades, and away you go. So you can see these are all exactly the size that you may need. So you don't have to do any trimming or anything like that.
So you would need to have a specific die for each size of block that you're cutting.
Which is one of the disadvantages, because then you have to buy a lot of dies. Okay, so I said this one was a 4-inch finished half square triangle it creates. But what if I want a 3.5 inch? Or I want a 5.5 inch or something like that? I would have to have separate dies.
To have a separate die for each one of those.
And these dies are not cheap. These dies are not a couple of bucks. These dies are anywhere between about $35, $40 a piece up to $100 and some odd dollars, depending. And we're going to talk in a future series here.
And some are sold in sets too. So
that's what I was just going to say. We'll talk about, there's different types. This is a single die. Then there's something called blocks on board, bobs. And then there are strip dies. And then there's cubes, okay, which are a combination of dies for certain things. And we are going to talk about all of those, but not today. So this is where your expense comes in. Whereas if you have a ruler and a rotary cutter, you can cut any size you want with those. However, these give you a very accurate cut. And also, you notice in this one, there looks like there's little notches out of that. If you're used to making half square triangles, for example, which this one is, in the traditional way, right sides of fabric, two pieces of fabric, right sides together, draw a diagonal line, sew a 1/4 inch away from that drawn line on either side, cut them in half, open them up, trim them down so they're the right size that you want. You don't have to do any of that with one of these. When you get those two pieces that are cut out from this, you lay right sides together. You'll know how to match them up because it has this little groove cut into them. And you just sew your 1/4 inch seam. Bingo. Perfect half square triangle. No trimming necessary. So it's a time saver for sure and more accurate. But that's essentially how one of these works. That's all there is to it. When you think about it, it's a very simple device. But it costs a lot of money. Okay.
Mainly, and most of your cost is the
Oops.
machine is sort of a one-time purchase, right?
Yeah.
And most of your cost is buying dies, right? For
Yeah.
but the dies are reusable. They're
Yeah,
reusable
you can
over and over
keep
again. Yeah.
using the dies over and over again. They're not a one-off, but they are going to cost you. And there are some dies like applique dies where you might want to decide, and we'll talk about this in a future session on Accuquilt. You might decide, well, that's a one-off. Like I have a die that does a gnome, okay, for applique pieces. That's the very first die I bought. It was on sale at the time. And of course, you know me and gnomes. So I had to have it. And I think that die on sale was about $45. I have used it exactly once since I bought it. So, that's an expensive little applique. $45 just to cut out the pieces for it. So there are some, and they have a lot of really cute applique dies, but you might want to say, okay, um, do I buy the gnome? It's a one off. Or do I buy the snowflake ones? Oh, because I'm making a Christmas quilt and I want to put snowflake appliques on it. And this makes cutting out the appliques a lot easier. And I'm going to be using multiples. That kind of thing. So that's one of the decisions you have to make when you're investing in the dies. Is it a one off? Or can I use this multiple times over to get my biggest bang out of my buck? Okay, so we've talked about basically how the machine works. Let's talk about the machines because I said that there are um, different machines. So let me just go to the Accuquilt site. Now, the Accuquilt site, and it's just accuquilt.com, is a great site for not just buying your dies from, if you're in the States especially. In Canada, well, we'll talk about that in a minute. Not necessarily where you want to buy your dies is from their main site. But let's talk about the different machines. So here you go. This one with the crank right here is pretty much the smallest one of the die cutting machines that they have. It's called the Go Me. It's very portable, folds up, cute little machine. But if you take a look at the die that they have in it right there and the one sitting in front of it, that's about this size, about 6.5 inches square. And just let me flip over for you. See it? About 6.5 inches square. That's the biggest die that the machine can handle. Okay. So you want to think about that when you're looking at machines. If you're going to make an investment, it would say to me that move your way up to a higher price machine because in most cases, the more you spend on the machine, the more dies it's going to handle because it can get the bigger dies. And some of the ones like the blocks on board or, ones that make like a wedding ring, a double wedding ring for that, or a mariner's compass or that, they are bigger dies. They might be as big as 10 inches or 12 inches in size. This little machine can't handle that. So you're limiting yourself by putting your money on that small machine. However, if you know you're sure you're never going to use a die that's bigger than that, and you can go onto their website and you can check out all the different dies that they have and determine, which ones do you really like? Will they fit in this machine? This is very affordable. Price on this machine this is American, $89.99. Now you'll notice they say regular price is $169.99. You save $80. Is this a sale? No, it is not.
I think it is a sale.
Is that a sale? I
Yeah.
thought they put this up like this all the time.
I don't know. They do have sales on a regular basis, so you would have to check regularly as to what the price is at
Yeah.
the time.
But a lot of times you'll see a lot of sites do this. They put up
Yeah.
regular price and they say you save, and that's the price it is all the time. But even if it was regular price of $169.99 American, that's their cheapest machine, cheapest as in cost, not in quality. They're all the same quality. Um, the next machine up is the Go. Now, the Go is the one that I showed you in the video. This is the one I use as my backup machine if I have anything go wrong with my electric machine. This one will cut wider dies. It's very portable. It all folds up. It is non-powered, but you can see the price on it. They're saying right now it's $329.99. So it's pretty much, well, it's more than double than the first machine
It's
that I
like
showed
three
you.
times the price.
Yeah. So they're getting pricey at that point. However, this one will handle larger dies,
In fact, it handles most of the dies,
most
right?
of the dies. Yeah. Um, Now the one that I purchased, that's my go-to machine, is the electric one called the Go Big. And you see there's no crank on this one, but now you're getting really pricey. They've got it on sale for $629.99 American. They say it's regularly $750. Notice that they're showing two of the dies side by side to go through. So, you can double up your smaller dies on this, and that makes for faster cutting. But you can use the bigger dies as well. You can go up to, it says, compatible with Go dies, including the new 14 by 16 Go Big dies. And they're coming out with more and more of that size of die. They're usually ones that do much more complicated quilts. And the advantage of them is you only have one die to cut all your pieces for the quilt as opposed to a whole bunch of little dies. But again, you have to assess that by what your needs are. Now, the last machine, and this is the one that I said is more industrial, is the Studio 2. And you see it looks very different from the other ones. It has a tray, and you put your die in there and you crank it. It's not an electric machine, and they advertise it as commercial level. It's a machine that is made to do hundreds of the same cut over and over again. Price wise on it, regular price is $715. Now it will do all of their dies. So any size it'll cut. But again, it's an industrial machine, not what most people need. Now they do have videos that show you how these things work as well. So if you go to their website and you click on the videos, in fact, they have quite a few videos. They show you all the ins and outs of using the various machines for that. So you got to pick the one that you think you're going to get the most bang for your buck from. Oftentimes they will bundle these together. For example, I buy most of my Accuquilt supplies from a local quilt store in my area called Kawartha Quilting. And they often have bundled sets. Like, for example, the Go Big, which is the machine I have. Now, these prices are going to be different because we're now talking Canadian dollars. So things are a little bit more in Canadian dollars. So they often bundle it with a die and some other things. Like, for example, this one is set up with one of what's called a cube, the 8-inch block. We'll talk about those on another session. So you can sometimes get deals if you watch. And as Walter said, Accuquilt puts stuff on sale all the time. The trick for us Canadians is the shipping.
Yeah, I looked into it when I was purchasing stuff for Steve. And if you purchase stuff from the U.S. site and you want it shipped to Canada, the shipping prices are extremely expensive to ship to Canada because the dyes and the machines are very heavy.
Yeah.
So shipping becomes expensive when you want to ship to Canada. There are alternatives. I mean, I used the cross-border shipping system, but then you run the risk of them losing your order. So I wouldn't recommend it.
No. So, yeah, this is something you have to take into consideration with it. Okay. So those are the various machines. And
Not only that, if you purchase from a retailer in Canada, like Kawartha Quilting, or I think the Quilt store in Newmarket has it as well,
mm,
or various other locations throughout the country, um, you will probably get a warranty from the store that you purchased it from.
yeah. Also, these local stores and that will put them on sale, but they have their hands are tied by Accuquilt. We have been told that basically Accuquilt, the main corporation, determines what the price is that a store that's an authorized dealer can sell the dies for. Now, there are people that sell used dies on like eBay or other sites as well, where you might be able to pick up a die for a lot less money. But you risk the chance of has it been abused. There isn't much that can go wrong with a die. Um,
But they do eventually wear
but
out.
they, yeah, like probably not in your lifetime with them, unless you're doing industrial level cutting where you're doing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of the same die
Mhm.
kind of a thing. So yeah, they will wear down. But you may be able to pick up some for secondhand as well. Personally, I don't want to deal with somebody else's garbage because that's the way I look at secondhand things. But you never know. I do know one person, she got a deal on a machine and some dies that had hardly ever been used.
Mhm.
But she lucked out on that one. Um, okay. So basic machines, price and that. So why do you need to invest in one or do you? Well, there are some factors. Are you going to use it? That's what held me back. I was suffering from FOMO. I had seen several videos on YouTube, and there's lots of videos on YouTube about using the Accuquilt. And Accuquilt has an official YouTube uh, site as well, which they put up 2 videos every week showing you, usually to sell new dies, but they do show you some tips and tricks on how to use it and like quilt patterns for them. And that's another thing about Accuquilt. All of their dies, when you buy them on the packaging, they will have a link to a free pattern to use that die with. And oftentimes it's more than one free pattern, and there are different ways you can use the same die to create different looks as well. AccuQuilt's very good at resources. Um, but I thought it was a cool idea. I came from a paper cutting world beforehand where I used die machines before, and I loved them. Um, So for me, it was a natural transformation, or not transformation. That's the wrong word. You know, a natural connection. Still not the word I want, but it'll work. Um, but I was hesitant.
Natural progression.
That's it. That's the word. No, it was there. But it's a lot of money. I remember going to a quilt show some time ago, and they had this show special where you got the electric machine and so many dies or something with it. And at the time, I think they wanted something like $1,200 or $1,500 for that. And I just about crapped my pants because at that point, I didn't know a lot about Accuquilt. And I thought, whoa, that's a major investment. Will I really use it or will it sit on a shelf? And it's no good if it's going to sit on a shelf. So first of all, you've got to make a determination for yourself. Am I going to use this and use this on a regular basis? Second thing you've got to look at is, do you want to go the cheaper route and buy the hand crank one, or do you want the electric? Well, do you have problems with your hands? Do you have arthritis? Let's face it. Most people who are quilting are not 20-year-olds. Okay? And the older you get, the more aches and pains and problems you may have with your limbs, right? So the electric machine would be the way to go. However, you have to assess that for yourself. So here's what you do. If you can find a local dealer with Accuquilt, go in and ask for a demonstration and try it out. Try out the crank, try out the electric, see which one you like better. Um, there can be a problem with the electric machine. I had a technical problem. When they built the machine that I own, they did not attach the adapter plug properly inside, and so it snapped off. And then I couldn't plug it in. But I took it to my local dealer and they replaced it, the whole machine. And then it did it again. And this time they took the machine, opened up the machine, and they fixed it themselves. And they fixed it. It was a simple fix. And it was a design flaw. And they have since told the company about it. And hopefully the new machines, when they come out with them, they will have put something into the manufacturing of them that will solve that problem, because it was a problem. But they fixed it up for me really well. That sucker's never going to snap off again with it. But that's the thing. It's an electronic machine. There's always problems with electronic machines. They're not as portable. The one folds up, has a crank, away you go, wherever you want to go to cut your stuff. They do take up space. It would be nice if you had a dedicated space where you can leave your machine unfolded, always opened up. In the case of the electric one, always plugged in very conveniently. You just walk over with your die and go, yeah, I'll just zip that through and away. I don't have that ability, but I'm pretty close to that. I have a space underneath my cutting table that the Accuquilt fits right there, and I have a plug that I have built into that island. And so I just pick it up, unfold it, bang, it's ready to go. So, but not everybody's as lucky to have that kind of space. Whereas the ones that are a little bit more portable, it's not such a big deal. They take up less space because they're smaller, and you don't have to worry about plugging it in. So, you got a spare countertop or something like that, you can just boom, and away you go with it. So do you need one? How much quilting do you do? If you quilt all the time, if you have trouble with your hands, as I've already said, yeah, you need one. You do. If you have problems cutting your fabric accurately with a ruler and a rotary cutter, you need one. It'll do that. If you find cutting for a quilt a lot of the same size pieces tedious, you need one. It'll make life easier for you. If you are worried about fabric waste, depends on how much of a penny pincher you are. There is fabric waste with an Accuquilt. We'll come to that when we actually do some cutting, and I'll show you what I mean and how to minimize the amount of waste. Personally, for me, I don't worry about waste. It isn't enough to get my knickers in a knot, but some people, it is. So these are all factors you have to take into consideration whether or not you want to invest in one. And it's not a one-off expense, because as time goes and you're using it more and more, you're going to find you're going to want more dies. And the dies are what are going to cost you because they are expensive. Okay. So overall, is it worth the investment? In my opinion, yes. I use it all the time. And when I pull up a pattern, I look at the pattern and decide for myself, how many of the dies do I own that I could use to make my life easier with the cutting? Now, it's not always an advantage to cut your fabric exclusively with the Accuquilt, no matter how many dies you have. For example, I'm working on the Churchill block right now that you may have seen in a couple of my other videos. And my original thought was I could use about 3 or 4 of my dies to cut the pieces for that. Guess what? It wasn't faster. It was faster to use my Stripology ruler, because that's the way the pattern was designed for cutting, to cut the strips of fabric and then subcut those with it, than it would have been to get out the machine, line the fabric up on the die, fold it over several times so I can make multiple cuts. By the time I did all of that, I could have already cut some of my strips with the others. So it's not always the better way to go. So you have to take that into consideration too. So some people have asked, can you use other die cutting machines? Because there's a lot of other die cutting machines out there, mostly for paper people, for paper crafters. Can you use the dies in an Accuquilt with those? Yes and no. I have done it. Way back before I owned an Accuquilt cutting machine, I owned a die. I was getting into English paper piecing, into doing hexies, and Accuquilt had a die that cut your hexies and also cut the paper templates for the hexies. It wasn't that expensive, and I had a Big Shot, a Sizzix Big Shot die cutting machine, and the die fit in that, and it works with that. However, most of the dies are designed in such a way that they're slightly too big to put through one of those other kind of die cutting machines, and that's done on purpose. Okay, that's the design by the manufacturer. They want you to buy their machine. Now, can you take a die from a different company and run it through an Accuquilt? Go. Yes and no. First of all, most dies for paper crafting are thin little wire dies. They're not on blocks like this. However, there are some dies that are. For example, Tim Holtz. If you're a paper crafter, you know who Tim Holtz is. He makes dies like this. And yes, you can. That thumb wasn't supposed to come up there like that. It's not a comment. You can run his dies through the Accuquilt system. However, you have to shim them. The size, the thickness of them is just that much less that you need to build it up. And that means some tinkering. Is it worth it? No. Because if you were to make it too tight, the pressure too tight because you built it up with a couple of the flat cutting mats or some cardboard, you can do that. That's called a shim. If you make it too tight, you can snap your rollers or the spring hinges to the rollers.
Yeah, it could cause damage to your machine,
Yeah,
right?
it's not worth it. It's not worth it. Okay.
I mean, if you're going to invest anyway in these dies, and that it really is worthwhile for you to invest in the machine itself that goes with it.
Yeah. Now, the other thing too is I was talking about shims and that. Sizzix, for their Big Shot machine, and Accuquilt does reference this, has a thing you can purchase. It's called the Sizzix Big Shot Plus Thinner Steel Rule Die Adapter G. It's basically a steel plate that is the correct thickness so that you can run an Accuquilt if the Accuquilt die fits in terms of width through the machine. That will have it so that you can cut with a Accuquilt die. I have one of these and I've used it. I had it way before I ever got into Accuquilt or even into quilting. It does work. Those plates are not that expensive. They're about $20 or something like that for it. But again, it may not always work with every particular die. So you're nickel and diming if you're going to this stage of it. You're best then to either make a commitment and buy the machine or say the hell with it. I'm not spending that kind of money. I will live with what I'm doing now. So again, your choice for it all. Okay, so that's an overview of the system. Next time, we're going to get into more of the particulars. We're going to talk about how to use the dies, how to cut your fabric properly so that you get you don't have much waste with it. Some little tips and tricks like that, and some other things that I have learned down the road after owning a system for over 2, almost 3 years possibly now. We're going to talk about the different types of dies too, We're going to talk about which dies should you buy when you first get your Accuquilt machine. Where will you get the biggest bang for the buck? So all that's coming up in the next few weeks in our sessions on the Accuquilt. In the meantime, if you have any questions about this, please feel free to put them in the comments below or send them to me email, and we'll try to address them on the next episode of So Chatty. But speaking of comments, we have a couple from last week's video. But before I do that, I'm going to say, so Walter, is there anything you think that we should tell people about the Accuquilt system that I haven't touched on already? You haven't used it much.
No, I haven't. Mind you, but that's because I don't usually do quilts, right?
No.
Um, I'm not sure. Just
No.
I don't really have a big thing other than that. Um, yeah, you can check out the Accuquilt site to see what is available for dies. You may want to use that as an idea as to what's available, and then maybe go to a local dealer to see if they have them in stock.
Yeah. Try them out. If you can get a chance to try it out, either maybe a friend has one, or if your local quilt store has them, or whatever.
Or if you have a friend that uses it,
That's what I
it
just
would be
said.
it would be good to go there and have them show you.
Yeah. Um, that kind of thing. There is I'll warn you of this. There is a love-hate relationship with Accuquilt. There are people who say they got one, they never hardly ever use it. And there's others like me who'll say, I use it all the time. I get my money's worth out of it. So they have lots of videos on the Accuquilt site, accuquilt.com, showing you all the ins and outs of using their system. And plus they have a YouTube channel as well. So you might want to go there as a resource of information. Okay, so that takes me to comments from last week. There's two. We were talking about tension problems with your embroidery machine, and this particular individual wrote, another thing to check if there's a tension problem and rethreading the top and bobbin doesn't fix the problem. Check how well your bobbin is wound. At my Bernina class last week, the instructor noticed that the thread on my bobbin didn't seem to be packed tightly enough. I rewound the bobbin twice so that it would have the twist running in the correct direction. Okay, that is a problem with winding your own bobbins. The easiest solution to that problem is don't use pre-wound. Yes, it's going to add to the cost of your materials, but you know that they are, in most cases, wound properly. And that would be a way to avoid a tension problem. Of course, there will be diehards out there, though, who say they wind their own bobbins for everything. Well, it's different to wind a bobbin on a domestic sewing machine than it is for one for a machine embroidery.
Yeah, and also, are you winding the top thread into your bobbin, or are you winding like a 60 weight or an 80 weight thread into the bobbin? Because
Yeah.
a lot of the pre-wound bobbins are 60 or 80 weight, and will go further than if you wind your own bobbins type of thing. And the machines seem to like using a thinner thread for the bottom
Yeah.
thread.
So, now I know there'll be people to say I wind my own bobbins all the time. I don't have a problem. Good. You do you. If that's working for you,
I have wound
go for it.
bobbins for the embroidery machine, and they worked okay for the project that I
Yeah.
did, but they run out really quick.
I was going to say that's the other disadvantage of winding your own bobbins. There's not as much thread on them. So you're changing your bobbins more regularly.
Yeah.
Another person, I don't know how to take this one. Person says, I looked through my whole book. There is nothing in there about oiling the machine, so I have not oiled it since I bought it. Well, first of all, what's wrong with this comment is, so what's your machine? In the
Yeah,
Janome 550E,
but specifically we were looking at Janome. The one we have is the 550E. There's the 500E. There's a 450E. I think there's a 300 or something like that. Janome, as they got more advanced, the numbers have increased.
mm-hmm.
All those machines are pretty much the same, and they all have oiling instructions in their
And they're
manuals.
in the manual. And you may have to do a little thorough search because, well, with Janome manuals, they're not particularly well written or laid out in finding things, but it's there.
Now, you may have this woman or person may have a machine like your old 15,000, right?
Yes.
And it may not have oiling instructions in it because they have what they call sealed units in them. And but those machines, you're expected to kind of take them in once a year or so to have them serviced.
Yeah. And the 15,000 did have an oiling spot. It had a wick
Yeah.
in underneath the bobbin case, just like a domestic machine.
Mm-hmm.
But that was it. The 550E, there's several other spots that you can, if you look in your manual, get at and oil those as well. Usually the only thing I need to oil on my 550E is the wick underneath the bobbin, and there's a little pad, a little wick up underneath at the top of the machine. There's a little cover that comes off. You just give it a drop of oil on that every now and then.
And
The other ones are not as easy to get at, but you can get at them.
even if your machine says it doesn't need to be, or it has no oiling instructions or whatever, you may find that over time it will require maintenance
Yeah.
where you would have to take the machine in and have it professionally maintained.
And those technicians, there is no such thing as an oilless machine, regardless of what the book is telling you. If it's not giving you instructions about how to oil it, probably in the book it tells you how often you should take it in for general maintenance with it. And that's when it's going to get oiled again. So, yeah, don't ever think. Like, they'll sometimes advertise these machines as never have to worry about oiling them. No, that's not true. That's not true. Metal on metal creates friction.
Yeah,
They
depending on
need
how
to be
much you
oiled.
used it. Like one of the lady I know that had a very elaborate Husqvarna machine, which was a combo sewing and embroidery machine. She recently sold her machine to another person, and she never ever used the embroidery in it ever in her life, right? So she only used the sewing part, right? And she would get the sewing part once in a while, take it in to get it maintained, but very rarely. She said she did all her own maintenance. So anyway, so she sold this machine to another lady, and the other lady wanted to embroider on it, and so she tried to embroider, and it got stuck right away,
It
and
seized.
it seized. And the she contacted me, and she says she knows we've done embroidery, and she says, well, what do you think would be wrong with this machine? I've never used the embroidery thing, so it's brand new. And now all of a sudden it's not working. And I said, well, just because you haven't used it doesn't mean that it'll work. Yeah, I said, more than likely your machine needs to be oiled, right? And so they took it to a service technician, and sure enough, that's what was had to have been done to it, even though her manual said in her manual that it never needed to be
And that
oiled.
she had never used that part of it.
Yes.
But even if they sit for long periods of time, the oil does dry up.
So in embroidery units, a lot of the things that end up needing to be oiled is if you sewing machines, it's the up and down function of your needle going up and down millions of times, and it's also the embroidery arm pushing back and forth that needs to be oiled on their on its track.
Yeah.
So so be aware that even if the machine says it doesn't need to be oiled, that you may run into a problem sometime down the road that it does need professional maintenance.
Yeah. So, yeah. Okay. So that's with the two comments that stood out over the last week about that. Keep sending in your comments. We'll try to answer them or respond to them as well. Just don't send those kind of comments that go like, well, I do this and it works for me all the time. Like I said, good for you. If it's working for you, then it's
Yeah,
working for
we're
you.
just talking about our
Mhm.
experiences and our knowledge and stuff like that. And if you do something completely different that goes against what we're saying, fine. that's fine for
That's
us.
fine. If it's
You
working,
go ahead and do
yep.
whatever. We're just giving you some general advice
Food for thought.
from our perspective.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it for this week. I'm sure there'll be a bunch of you that I'll be seeing tonight and tomorrow at the retreat. And we'll see you next week for the next edition of Everything You Want to Know About an Accuquilt, Part 2. So see you then. Say goodbye, Walter.
Goodbye.